That split second where everything froze, it told me everything I needed to know before he even opened his mouth. "Just someone from work," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I let out a small, humorless laugh. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Lie to me like I'm stupid." He set the drinks down slowly, his whole body tensing. "I'm not lying." I picked up his phone and held it out to him. "Then explain this." He didn't take it right away. He just stared at it, then at me, like he was calculating something. "I didn't mean for you to see that," he said finally. And there it was. Not denial, not confusion, just regret at being caught. Something inside me snapped, quiet but final. "I'm going for a walk," I said, standing up. "Wait," he started, reaching for me. But I stepped back. "I need air." And then I just walked. I didn't grab my bag. I didn't put on shoes. I didn't think about anything except putting distance between me and that moment. The sand was hot. The wind was stronger now, and the ocean sounded louder, like it was echoing everything I couldn't say out loud. I walked and walked until the crowds thinned out and the noise faded, until it was just me and the water and this overwhelming feeling that nothing in my life was as solid as I thought it was. I don't know how long I was out there before I realized someone was watching me. At first I ignored it, but then I felt it again, that awareness you get when someone's attention is fixed on you. I turned, and that's when I saw him. He was standing a little distance away, barefoot in the sand, looking at me like he'd been trying to decide whether to approach or not. There was something in his expression I couldn't immediately place. Not curiosity, not judgment, something deeper, like he could see straight through whatever I was trying to hold together. And for some reason, instead of walking away, I stopped. That was my second mistake of the day, because what happened next, that's what changed everything. He didn't rush toward me. That's what I noticed first. Most guys, especially in a place like that, would have either looked away quickly or tried to play it off like they weren't staring. But he didn't do either. He just stood there, calm, like he was giving me the choice. And for some reason, I walked closer. Even now, I don't fully understand why. Maybe I needed a distraction. Maybe I just didn't want to go back yet. Or maybe there was something in the way he looked at me, steady, not invasive, that made me feel like I wasn't about to be judged or questioned. "You okay?" he asked once I was close enough to hear him clearly. It was almost the same question Ryan had asked me that morning, but it landed completely differently. There was no expectation behind it, no pressure to answer a certain way. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Do I look okay?" He gave a small, honest shrug. "You look like you've got a lot on your mind." That almost made me laugh. It was such a simple observation, but it hit closer than anything Ryan had said to me in weeks. "Something like that," I said. For a second, neither of us spoke. The wind picked up, brushing my hair across my face, and I tucked it behind my ear, suddenly aware of how I must look, barefoot, wearing nothing but an oversized shirt, standing alone like I'd walked out of something unfinished. "I'm Jake," he said finally. I hesitated, then nodded. "Emma." He glanced back toward the busier part of the beach, then back at me. "You staying around here?" "Yeah," I said, pointing vaguely in the direction of the rental. "Up that way." "With someone?" he asked carefully. There it was, the question I knew was coming. "Yeah," I said. Then after a pause, "But not right now." He didn't push, didn't ask for details, just nodded like that told him enough. We started walking without really deciding to. Just side by side, matching pace, the ocean stretching out beside us. It felt strange how easy it was. No tension, no forced conversation, just movement. "You don't seem like you're having the best day," he said after a while. I let out a dry laugh. "That obvious?" "Not obvious," he said. "Just familiar." I glanced at him. "Familiar how?" He kicked at the sand lightly as he walked. "Like you just found something out you wish you didn't." That stopped me. I slowed down, turning slightly toward him. "Why would you say that?" He met my eyes for a second, then looked away again. "Because I've been there." Something about the way he said it, quiet, not performative, made it hard to dismiss. I swallowed, feeling that tightness in my chest again. "Yeah, well, you're not wrong." We kept walking, but now the silence felt different. He wasn't a stranger anymore, Not really. Not in the way people usually are. You don't have to talk about it, he said. Just figured I'd say that. I stared out at the water, the sunlight reflecting off it in a way that made everything too bright to focus on. He's been texting someone else, I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. Jake didn't react immediately, didn't interrupt, just listened. I saw it, I continued. Didn't mean to, but it was there. And once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. He nodded slightly. Yeah. It's not even the messages, I said, my voice tightening. It's the way he talks to her. Like there's a version of him I don't get anymore. That was the part that hurt the most. Not just that he might be cheating, but that he'd already emotionally stepped outside of us. Jake exhaled slowly. That's usually how it starts. I looked at him again. So what did you do? When it happened to me? He asked. I nodded. He gave a small, humorless smile. Stayed too long. Something in that answer hit me harder than I expected. Why? I asked. Because I kept thinking it would go back to how it was, he said.
Like if I just waited it out or tried harder or didn't make it a bigger deal, it would fix itself.
And did it?
He shook his head. No. It just dragged things out until there was nothing left to fix. We walked in silence again. But now everything felt heavier, realer. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly feeling exposed in a way that had nothing to do with what I was wearing. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do now, I admitted. We came here to fix things, and now it just feels worse. Jake stopped walking, and I stopped with him. You don't have to figure everything out today, he said. I let out a frustrated breath. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like everything just collapsed in like 5 minutes. Yeah, he said softly. It does feel like that. For a moment, neither of us moved. The waves crashed harder now, the wind picking up, the sky shifting just slightly, like something was changing. I just needed to get away from him for a minute, I said. Jake studied me for a second, like he was deciding whether to say something. Then don't go back yet, he said. It was such a simple suggestion, but it felt dangerous. I can't just disappear, I said. I'm not saying disappear, he replied. I'm saying take a breath before you go back into something you're not ready to deal with. I looked down at the sand, my mind racing. Part of me knew he was right. The other part felt like I was already doing something wrong just by standing there talking to him. I don't even have my phone, I said. He reached into his pocket. You can use mine if you need to check in or anything. I hesitated, then shook my head. No, it's fine. Truth was, I didn't want to check in. I didn't want to hear Ryan's voice right now. Didn't want to give him the chance to explain something I wasn't ready to listen to. Okay, Jake said, not pushing. We started walking again, slower this time. So what happens when you go back? He asked after a while. I let out a long breath. He's going to try to explain. I'm going to ask questions I probably don't want the answers to. And then, I don't know. Either we pretend it's not as bad as it is, or everything falls apart. Sounds about right, Jake said. I glanced at him. You're really good at this, you know that? At what? Being weirdly honest without making it worse. He smirked slightly. Comes from experience. We walked until the beach was almost empty, the houses more spread out, the noise from the main area barely audible anymore. It felt like we'd stepped into a different world entirely. I stopped again, turning toward the ocean. I don't want to go back, I said quietly. The words surprised even me. Jake didn't respond right away. You don't have to decide that right now, he said after a moment. But I already know, I said, my voice barely above the sound of the waves. I just don't want to admit it yet. That was the truth. I could feel it sitting there, heavy and unavoidable. He stepped a little closer, not touching me, just there. Then don't force yourself to say it out loud yet, he said. I turned to look at him, really look at him this time. There was something grounding about him, like he wasn't trying to pull me in or push me away, just letting me exist in that moment without expectations. And that's when it hit me, how different this felt from what I'd just walked away from. No tension, no guessing, no feeling like I was competing for someone's attention. Just clarity. And that scared me, because clarity meant I couldn't pretend anymore. The wind picked up again, stronger this time, and I wrapped my arms around myself instinctively. Jake noticed and shrugged off the light jacket he'd been wearing, holding it out to me. Here, I'm okay, I said automatically. Take it, he said. You're not. I hesitated, then took it, pulling it around me. It was warm, smelled faintly like salt and something clean I couldn't place. Thanks, I said quietly. He nodded. We stood there for a while, not talking, just watching the ocean shift as the afternoon started slipping toward evening. And somewhere in that silence, I realized something I hadn't expected. I wasn't thinking about Ryan anymore. Not in that moment. And that changed something in me, because it meant the grip he had on me wasn't as strong as I thought. But it also meant I was stepping into something unknown. And the way Jake looked at me then, like he was holding something back, like there was more he wasn't saying, it made my chest tighten again, but for a completely different reason. I didn't know it yet, but that moment on the beach, standing there wrapped in his jacket, was the beginning of something I wasn't prepared for, because walking away from Ryan was only the first part. What came next was where things really got complicated. I didn't go back to the house. That decision felt impulsive at first, like something I'd regret the second the adrenaline wore off. But the farther I got from the beach, the more it started to feel like the only honest thing I'd done all day. The street above the sand was quieter, lined with parked cars, small cafes, and rental shops closing up for the evening. The sky had shifted into that soft orange pink that makes everything feel suspended in time, like the day hasn't fully decided whether it's over yet. I stood there for a second, barefoot on warm pavement, holding my bag like I had somewhere to be, even though I didn't. That's when it hit me. I had nowhere to go. Not in a dramatic, life falling apart kind of way. I had money, I could book a hotel, call a friend, figure something out. But emotionally, I didn't have a place to land. Not in that moment. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to go somewhere safe just to avoid feeling everything. I pulled my hair back, took a breath, and started walking again, letting instinct lead instead of logic. I passed a couple of bars, a small grocery store, a bookstore that was just locking up for the night. Everything felt normal, steady, untouched by what had just happened to me. It was almost insulting. After a few blocks, I found a small diner-style place tucked between two larger restaurants. Nothing fancy. Neon sign, a couple of people inside, soft music playing through speakers that sounded slightly worn out. It felt neutral. That's what I needed. I stepped inside, grabbed a booth near the window, and finally sat down. The moment I did, everything I'd been holding together all day started to press in. Not exploding, not dramatic, just heavy. A waitress came over, friendly, casual, asked what I wanted. I ordered coffee I didn't really need, just to have something to hold on to. As soon as she walked away, I leaned back and stared out the window, watching people pass by, couples laughing, someone walking a dog, a group of friends heading somewhere louder, happier. I felt completely disconnected from all of it. And then, without meaning to, my mind drifted back to him, Jake. It was stupid. I knew that. I'd just walked away from a 5-year relationship, and instead of processing that, I was thinking about a stranger I met on the beach. But it wasn't about him, not exactly. It was about how I felt around him. Clear, like I wasn't trying to hold something together that was already breaking. That contrast, it stuck. My coffee came, and I wrapped my hands around the mug, letting the warmth ground me. I tried to think logically. What was my next step? Where was I staying tonight? What was I going to say to Ryan when he inevitably called? Because he would call. He hadn't yet, which was almost more unsettling. Either he was giving me space, or he was waiting for me to come back. I reached into my bag and realized something that made my stomach tighten again. My phone. I didn't have it. I must have left it in the beach rental. For a second, panic flickered. Not because I needed it, but because it meant I was completely unreachable. No messages, no calls, no way for anyone to contact me. But then something unexpected happened. The panic faded, and in its place was something quieter. Relief. For the first time all day, there was no pressure to respond, no incoming explanations, no "where are you" texts, no chance of getting pulled back into something I wasn't ready to face. I exhaled slowly, almost sinking into that realization. Maybe this was what I needed. Not answers, not closure, just distance. I stayed there for a while, finishing my coffee slowly, letting my thoughts come and go without trying to control them. Eventually, I paid, stepped back outside, and looked around again. Night had started to settle in. The air cooled slightly, the lights from shops and street lamps flickering on, the energy shifting from daytime calm to something more alive, more unpredictable. I should have booked a place by then. I knew that. But instead, I kept walking. And somehow, without planning it, I found myself drifting back toward the beach. Not the crowded part where I'd left Ryan, the quieter stretch, the place where I'd met Jake. I told myself it was coincidence, that I just needed the ocean again. But even as I walked down the sand, the sound of the waves louder now in the dark, I knew that wasn't the whole truth. I was looking for him, which made no sense. He was a stranger. There was no reason he'd still be there, no reason he'd come back, but part of me hoped he would. The beach was mostly empty now, just a few scattered figures in the distance, silhouettes against the dim light. I walked slowly, scanning without making it obvious, my heart doing something strange in my chest. And then I saw him. Same spot, standing near the water, hands in his pockets, looking out at the ocean like he hadn't moved since I left. For a second, I just stood there, processing. What were the chances? It felt too intentional to be coincidence. I walked toward him, slower this time, unsure of what I was even going to say. He turned before I got too close, like he'd sensed me again, and when he saw me, there was no surprise in his expression, just recognition. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I replied, stopping a few feet away. "You didn't go back," he said. It wasn't a question. I shook my head. "No." He studied me for a moment. "How'd it go?" I let out a small breath. "About as bad as expected." He nodded slightly, like that made sense. "You okay?" he asked again. This time I didn't deflect. "I don't know," I said honestly. That seemed to be enough for him. We stood there, the waves crashing louder in the dark, the air cooler now, wrapping around us in a way that felt different from earlier. "Why are you still here?" I asked after a moment. He gave a faint smile. "Could ask you the same thing." "Fair," I said. He looked back out at the water. "I come here sometimes when I need to think." "At night?" "Especially at night." I nodded, understanding that more than I expected. "I didn't go back either," I admitted quietly. He glanced at me. "Figured." I hesitated, then added, "I also don't have my phone." That got a small laugh out of him. "That's either really freeing or really stressful." "Both," I said. He stepped a little closer. Not too close, just enough that I could feel his presence more clearly in the dark. "You got somewhere to stay?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not yet." He didn't respond immediately, like he was weighing something. "I've got a place not far from here," he said carefully. "It's nothing weird, I'm just saying if you need somewhere to crash instead of wandering around all night." There it was. The moment that could turn this into something else entirely. I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to read what wasn't being said. He didn't look pushy, didn't look like he expected me to say yes. Just offering. "You don't even know me," I said. He shrugged lightly. "I know enough to know you're not having a great night." "That's not exactly a strong foundation," I said. "No," he admitted, "but it's something." I exhaled slowly, my mind racing again. Every logical part of me said this was a bad idea, that I should book a hotel, call a friend, do something normal, safe, predictable. But another part of me, the part that had already walked away from Ryan, that had already broken out of something familiar, wasn't looking for predictable anymore. It was looking for something real. And standing there, with the sound of the ocean filling the silence between us, I felt something shift again, a decision forming. "Okay," I said quietly. His expression didn't change much, but there was a subtle release in his posture, like he'd been holding his breath just slightly. "Okay," he echoed. And just like that, I stepped into something I couldn't fully see yet, something that wasn't about Ryan anymore, something that felt like the start of a completely different kind of story, one I wasn't ready for. But I went anyway. Another pause. Then more quietly, he said, "Sometimes those are the ones that change things." I looked at him, that line settling deeper than it should have. "Yeah," I said softly. "I'm starting to realize that." The room felt smaller after that, not in a suffocating way, but in a way that made everything feel more focused, more immediate. I set my glass down on the table, my fingers lingering on the edge of it. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Yeah? Why were you really still on that beach?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back slightly, looking at me with a kind of honesty that felt rare. "Because I had a feeling you might come back," he said. That caught me off guard. "Why?" I asked. He shrugged lightly. "Because you didn't look like someone who was done with that moment yet." I held his gaze, my chest tightening slightly. "And if I hadn't come back?" I asked.
Then I would have just gone home, he said. And that would have been it. Something about that answer made everything feel heavier, realer. I nodded slowly, looking down for a second before meeting his eyes again. I'm glad I did, I said. The words slipped out before I could overthink them. He didn't respond immediately, but something in his expression shifted. Me too, he said quietly. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged. Not in an aggressive or rushed way, but in that slow, undeniable way where you can feel something building without either person naming it yet. I stood up first, more out of nervous energy than anything else, walking over to the window. You ever feel like your life just splits in half? I asked, looking out at the dark street. Like before something and after something? He replied. Yeah, all the time, he said. I turned back toward him. I think today was one of those days for me, I said. He nodded. Yeah, it sounds like it. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed loosely. I don't even know what happens next, I admitted. You don't have to, he said. You just have to decide what you're not going back to. That hit me, because that part I did know. I wasn't going back to pretending things were okay with Ryan. I wasn't going back to ignoring what I saw or shrinking myself to keep something alive that was already fading. That chapter was done, even if I hadn't fully processed it yet. I'm not going back to him, I said, more to myself than to Jake. He didn't react strongly, just a small nod. Then that's your starting point, he said. I took a breath, letting that settle. Then I pushed off the wall and walked back toward the couch, but this time I didn't sit on the opposite end. I sat closer, not right next to him, but close enough that the distance felt intentional. He noticed, but didn't comment. Can I be honest about something? I said. Yeah. This should feel wrong, I said, being here with you after everything that just happened. And does it? He asked. I shook my head slowly. No. That was the truth, and it scared me because it meant I wasn't just reacting to Ryan. I was moving towards something else, something I didn't fully understand yet. Jake studied me for a second, like he was trying to read where I was emotionally, how far this moment could go without breaking something. I'm not trying to be a rebound, he said quietly. I know, I replied immediately. That's not what this feels like. Then what does it feel like? I hesitated. Like clarity, I said finally. That word hung between us. Clear, simple, dangerous, because clarity means you can't hide from your own choices. He shifted slightly, turning toward me more fully now. Emma, he said. My name's softer this time, more personal. I felt it, that moment, the one where things either stop or move forward. There's always a second where you can still step back. I didn't. I closed the distance, not all at once, not rushed, just enough. And when he met me halfway, it wasn't impulsive, it was intentional, careful, like both of us understood exactly what this meant, not just physically, but emotionally. It wasn't about replacing Ryan. It wasn't about escaping what happened earlier. It was about choosing something that felt honest in that moment, even if it was complicated, even if it didn't have a clear future. When I pulled back, the room felt different, quieter. He didn't say anything right away. Neither did I, because there wasn't really anything to say. Some moments speak for themselves. I leaned back slightly, my heart steady but aware, my thoughts clearer than they'd been all day. I'm not the same person I was this morning, I said quietly. He nodded. No, you're not. And he wasn't wrong, because that version of me would have stayed, would have made excuses, would have tried to fix something that wasn't mine to fix alone. But I didn't. I walked away. And somehow, in the middle of losing something I thought was permanent, I found a version of myself that wasn't afraid to choose differently. I didn't know what Jake and I were going to be. I didn't know if this was temporary or the start of something real. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about the future in a way that scared me. I was just present. And that was enough. Because sometimes the most important thing isn't where you end up. It's the moment you finally decide not to stay where you don't belong anymore. And that night, in that small apartment near the ocean, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going back. Not to Ryan, not to who I used to be. Not ever again. I didn't sleep much that night.
Not because I was uncomfortable or regretting anything or even overthinking it the way I normally would. It was something else. My body was still, but my mind kept moving, replaying everything, not in chaos, but in pieces that finally made sense when I looked at them honestly. Jake had given me his bed without hesitation and taken the couch. No weird energy, no expectations, no subtle pressure. That alone told me more about him than anything he could have said. I lay there staring at the ceiling for a long time, listening to the faint sound of the ocean through the window. It was softer from here, more distant, but still steady. Like a reminder that something bigger keeps moving, whether your life feels stable or not. At some point, I sat up, ran my hands through my hair, and let out a slow breath. That's when it really hit me. It was over. Not the fight, not the argument, not the we'll talk about it later phase. The relationship. 5 years. Gone. And the strangest part? I didn't feel broken. I felt clear. That didn't mean it didn't hurt. It did. There were memories attached to Ryan that weren't fake. Late nights, road trips, inside jokes that used to feel like they belonged only to us. But those memories didn't outweigh what I felt now. Because what I felt now wasn't confusion anymore. It was certainty. I got up quietly, walked out into the living room, and saw Jake asleep on the couch, one arm draped over his eyes like he'd passed out mid-thought. The blanket had slipped halfway off him. I stood there for a second, just looking at him. It would have been easy to romanticize the moment, to turn it into something bigger than it was, but I didn't. What I saw wasn't some perfect answer to everything that had just fallen apart. I saw someone who met me in a moment I needed, and didn't complicate it. That mattered. I walked over, gently pulled the blanket up over him, careful not to wake him. He stirred slightly but didn't open his eyes. "Thanks," I whispered, even though he couldn't hear it. Then I stepped back, grabbed my bag, and sat at the small kitchen table. I needed to think about what came next. Because clarity doesn't mean everything is solved. It just means you can finally make decisions without lying to yourself.
I needed my phone. I needed to go back. Not to fix things, but to close them. That part couldn't be avoided. I sat there for a while, just letting that settle in. Eventually, Jake shifted on the couch, blinking awake slowly. It took him a second to register where he was. Then his eyes landed on me. "Hey," he said, his voice rough from sleep. "Hey. You okay?" he asked, pushing himself up slightly. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." He studied me for a second, like he was trying to see if that was actually true. "You look different," he said. I let out a small breath. "I feel different." He nodded slowly, like that made sense. "You heading back?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I have to." He didn't argue, didn't tell me to stay longer or delay it. "Want me to come with you?" he asked instead. I thought about it. Part of me liked the idea of not walking into that alone, but another part of me knew this was something I had to do myself. "No," I said gently. "I need to handle this." He nodded again, respecting that immediately. "All right." I stood up, adjusting my bag on my shoulder. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" "For not making this weird. For not trying to turn it into something it didn't need to be." He gave a small, almost tired smile. "You needed space. I just didn't get in the way of it." "Still," I said, "it mattered." There was a pause. Then he said, "You'll be okay." It wasn't said like a question. I nodded. "Yeah, I will." I hesitated for a second, then stepped closer and hugged him. It wasn't intense. It wasn't lingering. It was real. When I pulled back, we both knew there wasn't anything else that needed to be said. "Take care of yourself, Emma," he said. "You too, Jake." And then I left. The walk back to the rental felt completely different from the night before. Same streets, same ocean in the distance, but I wasn't running from anything anymore. I was walking towards something I already understood. When I got there, Ryan's car was still outside. Of course it was. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. He was sitting on the couch, exactly where I expected him to be, like he hadn't moved all night. His eyes snapped up the second he saw me. "Emma, I'm just here to get my things," I said, cutting him off before he could start.
He stood up quickly. "Can we talk?" "No," I said calmly. His face tightened. "You just left. You disappeared. You didn't answer your phone." "I didn't have my phone," I said. That stopped Jin for half a second. "Then stay now," he pushed. "Let's just talk this through." I shook my head. "There's nothing to talk through." "That's not true," he said, stepping closer. "You're reacting based on one message." "It's not one message," I interrupted. "It's everything that message represents." He exhaled sharply. "You're throwing away 5 years over something that didn't even—" "Stop," I said, my voice firm. He froze. "I'm not throwing anything away," I said. "You already did that."
You just didn't say it out loud. That's not fair, he snapped. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel pulled in. "I'm not angry anymore," I said quietly. That seemed to confuse him more than anything else. "Then what is this?" he asked. "It's me being done," I said. The silence that followed was heavy. "Emma," he started, softer now, but I shook my head. "I'm not going to stand here and let you rewrite what happened so it feels easier for you," I said. I saw what I needed to see. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing slightly. "So that's it? You're just walking away?" I picked up my bag, steady. "Yeah," I said. He stopped moving, staring at me like he was waiting for something more dramatic. There wasn't anything. No yelling, no crying, just the truth. "You're really not coming back?" he asked. I paused at the door, then looked at him one last time. "No," I said, and that was it. I walked out, closed the door, and didn't look back. The ocean was still there when I stepped outside, same as it had been the day before. Same waves, same rhythm, but everything else felt different, because I wasn't carrying the same weight anymore. I didn't know what was coming next, didn't know if I'd see Jake again, or if that night would stay exactly what it was, a moment that helped me shift direction. But I didn't need to know. For the first time in a long time, I trusted myself to figure it out. And that was enough. Because sometimes the real story isn't about who you lose. It's about who you become when you finally stop holding on to something that was never going to choose you back.